Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of What Do You Really Think? I'm Buck Sexton, and
I am Marc Lamont Hill, the great seer.
That's right, the visionary, at least in his own mind. He thinks he can tell you he is the Nostradamus of Quake media, and of the progressive left. And I'm sitting here to tell you I'm the grumpy old Eeyore who is going to say that all of his great predictions aren't going to come true. But then I can only put so much on the line here because I already owe the man an expensive sushi dinner. So let's get to it, Mark. We got 2021, and as people listening to this, they will have enjoyed hopefully a very nice holiday. Those who celebrate Christmas hopefully had a great Christmas, Hanukkah, and so on. We're going to be up at New Year's here, going into 2021. We got a Joe Biden presidency starting. What do you think is the biggest first thing? Let's kick this into January that you're just watching closely and you think is going to really matter for this country and this new administration.
I think the first 100 days of this presidency are going to come down to his COVID response. I think that we've had so much conversation about leadership. You know, I mean, in many ways, Biden doesn't have anything else to do but lead on this. The technology's done. The medical issues been solved, right? We have vaccines in place, but there's going to be a hell of a conversation about who gets access to it. There's going to be a hell of a conversation about distribution. And there's going to be a hell of a public health conversation about when do you wear a mask? How do you wear a mask? What kind of social distancing do we establish? How do we work out the details in a world where right now we basically assume that everybody has COVID, right? All of our spacing guidelines, all of our mask guidelines, all of our hand washing guidelines are under the presumption that everyone either has or could have COVID. But once people start getting vaccinated, there's going to be people who are like, look, I sat on my hands long enough. I promised you all, I wore a mask. I played by the rules. Now I'm vaccinated. You guys told me I'm safe. I don't need to wear a mask anymore. I'm not wearing one just to make other people feel comfortable. You're going to have to trust me. And that kind of conversation is going to have to be managed from the top down. And so we'll get a very clear sense of how Biden is going to manage a country that's going to be restless after 12 months in the House.
So I think, by the way, I mean, everything you've said, I think that is how it's going to play out, and those are top issues. I would add, from the perspective on the right, that I'm trying to tell people this because there's this whole Joe Biden, and look, I underestimated Joe Biden's chances of winning. And I'm talking about in the primary. I was like, well, that old geezer, there's no chance he's going to. I mean, he's never going to win the primary, and he's sure as hell never going to win the election. So that just shows you, political prognostication is a tough game for a reason. I mean, if pollsters can be as wrong as they are, those of us who are just sort of sitting in the armchairs making guesses don't really do much better. But I will say this, Biden I do think he's kind of Mr. Magoo and a little bit of a bumbling fool sometimes, or at least that's how he comes across. Yeah. He has been given a winning hand here. This is not a difficult situation for him to look very good the first 6 months. The built-in narrative is going to be, and I mean, I almost hate saying this out loud. And by the way, for anyone watching this is not how I view it. I'm just saying this is the way the media and the perception will quickly turn to is Joe Biden is the cure. That's basically going to be the way that it feels, because you're going to have this guy who comes in with, no one's going to be thinking about Operation Warp Speed. No one's going to be thinking about all the effort and the billions of dollars and the Trump management and all that stuff that came before. It's just going to be, okay, we're in this terrible pandemic. Joe comes into office I'll make a prediction right now. Within 60 days of Joe Biden's inauguration, they will, the voices will be raised up from across America. Oh, we're pretty much like, we got this under control will be a thing that you're hearing from people across the country. Not that it's gone, but we've got this under control. And it'll be because of the vaccine, not the 90-day mandate or whatever he puts into place, but the vaccine is going to be an enormous, enormous weapon.
So, and that's actually one of my predictions. I think the vaccine is going to be grossly underutilized. I think that poor people of color are going to be underrepresented in the numbers of people who take them. I think there are going to be lots of people who are skeptical, and I think that a huge problem for the Biden administration is going to be how to convince people to take a vaccine that was a kind of microwave vaccine. I think people are going to be very uneasy about it, and I think the numbers are going to be much lower than public health officials are
Why would minorities, in your view, have a particular? So I'm before I ask you that question, I just want to add in here. I do think that there was, and I mean, if we were like roll tape on this, it would Cuomo did it, Biden did it. There was a lot of you can't trust this vaccine because it's Trump's FDA that's approving it. I think that was unfair, reckless political rhetoric, and I think that they won't ever be held to account. They won the election, whatever. But put it comma on that, and you can respond to that obviously if you want. But why are other than that being told by Joe and Kamala you can't trust this, which I think they were for a while. I mean, Cuomo wanted to have his own state board look at this after Pfizer and the FDA and everybody else already cleared it because of Trump. Why would minorities be specifically, especially given the data that shows they're at higher risk on a per capita basis? Why would they be suspicious? More so than other people who are also suspicious.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's the built-in suspicion of the speed with which this has been developed. I think there have been some memes going around and internet disinformation, which I think is unfair. They've been searching for a cure for the cold and HIV and AIDS and all this stuff for decades, and suddenly they're able to solve COVID in like a week, right? I mean, there's that stuff, which is unfair, obviously, because this is a very different type of infection. This is something that doesn't mutate and change nearly as quickly. It's much easier. It's also an extension of other things that we've studied before. But I think there's that. But there's a deeper and more fundamental issue for communities of color. And that is a very legitimate distrust of the American medical establishment. This is an establishment that, I mean, if American and really Western medicine and science for centuries has said that Black people were intellectually inferior. I mean, the top scientists were saying this stuff, right? When you go to the world's fairs, even as recently as the early part of the 1920s and 30s, they were still trumpeting around Black people in cages and showing scientific proof that Black folk were, again, genetically inferior, more lascivious, more violent, more dangerous, etc. The psychiatric establishment, the mental health establishment, has often pathologized Black people. Think about illnesses like drapetomania, right? Which is sort of an obsession with fleeing, with leaving, right? It was actually a mental disorder that was initially assigned not to runaway brides, but to Black people that ran away from plantations. So the American medical establishment said that Black people who ran away from slavery had mental illnesses because they were obsessed with fleeing situations. And then, of course,
can I jump in for one? I don't want to cut off your answer, but I just want to jump in for 1 second. I mean, because I'm somebody who talks a lot with skepticism about the medical community in general. I mean, you've just laid out, those are all quote experts, right? I mean, you just laid out a very compelling case for why experts should be able to be questioned at a minimum and questioned publicly and vigorously. And I think the social media censorship that we're seeing kind of prohibits that. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut off your. Let me slow your roll. Go ahead.
No. It's a great point you make, and that's why what we were debating last week about how do you censor experts? How when do you deplatform them? When do you put a tagline or a note next to them? I think it's a really interesting and provocative conversation because we don't want to be completely deferential to people in power in such a way that they can't be challenged or questioned. You're absolutely right about that. It's just a question of the degree to which we do it. But I think the biggest thing for Black folk, of course, is the Tuskegee experiment from 1932 until 1972. Right? This was supposed to be what Black people were told, and what actually happened was radically different. Now, the urban legend is that Black people were given syphilis. And they weren't given syphilis, but the study what the medical establishment did do was not treat Black people for syphilis. And so essentially they said, we're going to do a longitudinal study. We're going to do a long-term study of what happens when syphilis goes untreated. But what the Tuskegee experiment did was they didn't tell anybody that. No one would sign up to not get their syphilis treated. What they did was a bunch of Black people.
It's a horrible disease. My God.
Exactly. And Black people who had syphilis showed up to get treated. They had the people think they got treated for syphilis, and they didn't give them medicine for syphilis. And then for 40 years, they observed these people who thought, just to see what would happen, they observed these people who thought they had been treated for syphilis go untreated. It is the gold standard in unethical medical research, and it was done specifically and exclusively to Black people because, of course, they were seen as disposable. And so. And this just ended in.
Could I just ask? I mean, I don't want to, but I think it's important. But the idea here, like, a lot of people want this vaccine, right? So this is a scarce and highly prized good. So doesn't that, like wouldn't, if I'm somebody who really want to get the vaccine, don't people in the minority community say, well, I mean, if some other guy like wants, you see what I'm like,
Yeah,
people
yeah.
want this thing, right?
And that presumes that the government's telling the truth. There were people who really got treated for syphilis. So there are white people who really wanted to get treated for syphilis, and they got treated. It's just when the black people showed up, they had a different plan for them that they didn't know about. So what I could easily think that if me and Buck go in for the same highly prized, highly coveted vaccine, and Buck actually gets the right needle, and I get the different needle. I have a right to question that if I believe that the government doesn't have the same plan.
Who could overcome? I mean, I could come up with some ideas or names, but like, how or who do you overcome that skepticism? Because as you know, time is of the essence. I mean, I've been saying this to friends. I mean, this sucks, but you and I both know this is reality. The vaccine is in distribution. It's happening, and there are people who are going, and there are thousands of them who are not going to get that vaccine in time, and in January and February and March will die. And it is purely a function of vaccine timing. That is just reality, right? I don't think there's a way around that. So in that environment, you know what I mean? How do you overcome the skepticism? Because there will be people who miss. They got to the distribution of this is. It sounds like like a booster shot they used to get for tetanus. Like nobody no. Right, it's 99 or 97 degrees or something, below, negative 97 Celsius or something. It has to be extreme, and it has to be staggered. You have to thaw it to give it to somebody. You have to show up on time. That's just a long way of saying there are going to be people who miss their vaccine or who back out at the last second. I'm not saying a lot of people, but there will be people who back out from the vaccine and they die. That's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that there's going to have to be extraordinary. I mean, this is where I think, again, leadership will be helpful. More people will. There are people who will trust Trump on this. Those people will also trust Biden on this, right? And there'll be people who
should Trump and Biden and Barack Obama and anyone else you want to throw in the mix. Should they do we are all going together right now? This is not about anything political. This is not, and we are going to get jabbed with this vaccine in front of you on live TV. People have talked about stuff like this.
Yeah, I'd prefer if only two termers did it. I think there's a level of gravitas.
There.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's the first time he spiked it in the end zone in a couple of weeks. So I'll let it go.
No, but I do think that all the presidents doing it would be a great first step. I think, though, you're going to need more than that. In the most vulnerable communities, you're going to need two things. One, you're going to need people. You're going to need sort of culture, like pastors doing it in large churches will actually probably be more effective, because the assumption is going to be, well, of course they gave Obama the good one, right? But again, I don't want to make it seem as if people in the community are just being paranoid. I think they're legitimate questions that are completely rational and reasonable. Not to mention the fact that it's impossible to do long-term studies on this stuff. There really could be problems. How many times?
People are going to get like fevers and chills like that. I mean, based on these studies we've already seen, like. Some people are going to get this and they're going to have a bad reaction to it. That's going to happen.
Right. And not to mention, think of all those mesothelioma commercials we see when we're watching Judge Judy, right? Who knows in 10 years what's going to happen? So there will be people who are legitimately concerned about long-term impacts, questions around fertility, questions around.
Are you going to get it?
I am. I am going to get it because I think that I have a responsibility as a public-facing person to assuming I believe in this, and I do, until I get evidence to the contrary, I think I have a responsibility to encourage, particularly people in my community, to get this, because I think it will stop us from dying. I think, my 81-year-old mother was like, look, I'm definitely going to get it. She said, I don't want to get the first batch. I mean, she said, maybe I'll get the second or third batch out of it. Her thing was like, she's like,
she wants them to knock the kinks out a little bit in the system before she.
Exactly. She's not like thinking it's a conspiracy. She's just thinking doctors get stuff wrong and science messes up in the first batch of anything. Who wants the first iPod, right? So there's a way that I think there's skepticism, but I think having like cultural figures, having leaders, having pop culture figures, having pastors, having imams, that kind of thing will be very helpful. But I think we may have to do something else. And this is going to irritate you, I think.
Uh-oh.
We're going to have to pay people to take it. We're going to have to incentivize people to take it.
I'm honest. I've never heard of that as an idea. I mean, it feels a little bit like Yang, like Yang Cash or whatever, like Freedom Bucks or whatever his thing was. You wanted to give everybody some money, right? Which we ended up doing because of COVID, but not really. What we ended up doing is subsidizing people to not work because the government took their jobs away from them, which is interesting, isn't it? Because now people realize that there are certainly times when the government should be sending people checks, and during COVID has been one of them.
Absolutely.
And I think it's actually a point of bipartisan frustration, and there should be some shame heaped on some folks that there were just the fact that there were months where they didn't find a way to get money to people that didn't have jobs because the government said that was wrong. It was done for political reasons. Yeah. I would say it was obviously Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats pushing it. You would say that probably that they weren't giving enough money from the Republican side. But, anyway, the point is it should have. This is one of those times where it's like, if North Korea invaded tomorrow and, they were like landing in Brooklyn, I'd be out there with an AR-15, like defending all the MSNBC watchers and not, like there should be things that are beyond, that are beyond, and I would have hoped that was one of them, but obviously it wasn't. But yeah, no, I think that we're going to have to see how this goes. I will say that the data pretty clearly indicates that if we get healthcare providers and the most at risk vaccinated, and I think that there are not going to be that many people in their 70s and 80s who are like, no way I'm taking that risk, right, of taking the vaccine, although I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I'm going to get it. I mean, I asked you, I'll just say I'm going to get it when I can. And my assumption is, let me ask you that. When do you think I think I'll be able to get it in May or June. I think that's when like my turn will come.
I think your turn will come. Yeah. Based on all the numbers I've seen, the first real significant batch, when you talk about a few 100,000, you're looking at maybe March, and it's going to go to the frontline folk. It's going to go to the elderly. It's going to go to, and Beyonce, of course. And then I think when you get to like April, May, June, I think, that's when we'll have a fighting chance at it. Now,
yeah, but what's interesting is I think we'll be taking it when already the like monthly death toll has gone down into the hundreds for the month nationwide, because that's where I think we'll be. Instead of having tens of thousands a month, I think by May or June you'll be in the 500 to 1,000 a month. Hopefully, look, that may be highly optimistic, but that's where I hope it'll be. That's not hospitalization. That's not hospitalizations and infections. That's just deaths. But when you look at the death data, I mean, this is a disease that kills people that kills people, unfortunately, pretty effectively for an airborne virus in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Once you get down into 50s, 40s, 30s, it's still dangerous. I've had people I work with who have had it. I had a young, healthy friend who works with me in one of my media programs, who was out for like 10 days. I mean, like fever, it's bad, right? You and I know that. But once you get those upper cohorts vaccinated, it'll become something that makes people sick and maybe sends them to the hospital. It will become something that kills people very rarely once the vaccination gets through that upper end population.
Right. It'll be much more like the flu at that point, right?
That's right. At that point, you'll take this like other part of it, because it is like the flu for people under 50. I mean, in terms of the death data, for whatever reason, it's really lethal for older people, but it's not. It's basically like the flu if you're younger than that.
Yeah, it hits that respiratory part, and that's what I'm hoping. And also, we're still unclear about reinfections and things like that. There's obviously no herd immunity, but with the different strands, it's just unclear. The data is very fuzzy, and I've read almost every study. I think I've read every study on this around reinfection, and it's not entirely clear what it means to test positive on two different occasions. And so, that also will be a factor, right? Everyone's had it, I've had it already. So I'm not rushing to the top of the line, and I believe I still have antibodies as recently as 3 weeks ago, from when I was infected in July. So,
how bad did it hit you, by the way?
I mean, I the first few days were the roughest. Within a week, I felt like I was over the worst part of it, and within 2 weeks, I felt like I was back to 80%, and it took about a month to be 100%.
So kind of, I mean, I'm not a flu truther, but I mean, it's kind of like I got wrecked by the flu in 2016, and it's a week of like you were hit by a bus, and then it's a week of okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit normal. And like by the end of the month, you're kind of like, okay, like I can go out and like, lift weights or run or do whatever I want to do. So I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to make my prediction for you now. I think that an issue that has completely, fallen off the radar going into the summer. So we're not going to be able to test me on this one for a while, but going into the summer and next fall, you're going to see a huge surge once, again, assuming COVID works the vaccine works the way we think it will against COVID. I think next summer, next fall, you're going to have a border crisis that's going to blow people's minds, because under the new administration, there is going to be a push for legalization, for amnesty, for if Democrats don't do it now, they're never going to do it. And so I think you're going to see a huge inflow, because you want to be here. You want to be here when they're giving it out to people. You don't want to be the one that is like, oh, I could have gone. So I think you're going to see, and that's going to raise a lot of questions for people. People who have been here, who have been like DACA for 10 years, how are they going to feel about, new people showing? It's going to be very, very interesting. That's kind of an out there prediction.
You think the Dreamers are going to be like, these people coming across the border, stealing our resources, taking out?
I will say that working class white and black voters, when it comes to this issue, and there's been some very interesting, I'm sure you've seen some of the social science on this, have very different views of immigration, particularly from south of the border and from Central America. Very different view than the elites in either party. They feel very differently about this. And the black community, when they look into the data, feels very differently about illegal immigration.
Yeah, I think they're wrong, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I think you're going to see a big thing come up. And so now I got to ask, so, are you I know you're not like a big, Christmas guy, don't expect to see any photos of Mark with a Santa Claus hat on, prancing around with the reindeer or anything like that. But are you I'm actually that way about I'm like, New Year's Eve is amateur night. I don't like it. I don't like big parties. I don't like it. But I feel like this year, everyone's just going to be sitting at home, ordering Uber Eats or whatever, and watching the ball drop alone. Like, is there anything else going on? What about you?
That's a good question. What will I be doing? I will be sitting at home, probably watching a great movie, maybe have a drink and get to bed early. I'm going to treat it like a non-thing.
That's what I do pretty much. I've done that every year, I think, for almost the last decade. I'm not a New Year's Eve guy. I hate the idea of going to, I'm the guy who complains about the restaurant that I like having a New Year's Eve prefixed, where they give me food that I don't want and they jack up the price on me. And I'm like, I don't want the chicken. I don't go to a restaurant for the chicken. I want something else. Like, I want I don't want the cod that you cooked 6 hours ago and now we're going to reheat and tell me it's the New Year's Eve special because you're putting some truffle sauce on it or something. Like, I want what I want. I don't go out to eat to be told what I'm eating. So I'm like the Grinch of New Year's Eve. I'm just going to say that I'm not a New Year's Eve guy. I feel like you never, you're either with your girlfriend or your wife or whatever, and you're kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll make out at midnight. Like, we can make out anytime.
Exactly.
I've never had that, like, ooh, like the girl that I've never had the experience of it's New Year's Eve and I get to make out with someone that I like haven't got, you know what I mean? That like, it's like some new experience. You see this in movies all the time, Yeah. It's like we're in like a teen rom-com or something. You're like, oh, the prom queen, like I'm going to make, no, you're either at New Year's with the prom queen because you've been making out with her for, a family show, right? Making out for 6 months, or you're not making out with the prom queen. Like, right. You don't pull it on New Year's Eve.
A different choice. No, I agree. So it becomes in some ways, for me, historically, it has been like the confirmation of a relationship, right? If the person you spend New Year's with is the person you're supposed to be with, or people think you're supposed to be with, right? So it's a high stakes choice to say, I'm going to spend New Year's with you. But for a whole bunch of people avoiding relationships, this is the year where you can blame it on COVID. You don't have to be with anybody. You can just stay in your house.
I would be fascinated. I haven't really talked to many of my single male friends about this because I don't really talk to people that much these days, period. But I'm wondering what it's like for them, outside of a relationship. What has it been like? I got to assume that it's all Tinder or the equivalent, right? Whatever someone's preferred. And it's the only excuse I've ever heard of where guys for the entirety of the year 2020, they've been like, can't go out to a bar, so why don't you come have a drink? Come have a drink at my place is the new, like, meet me for a coffee at Starbucks.
Exactly. Because you can. It's been great. And now there's this new app, Clubhouse, which is added. Have you seen this yet?
No.
Clubhouse is like, it's the hottest new thing. And in fact, they're already Facebook and Twitter are already figuring out how to steal it, but it's basically like it's like a meetup room, but it's all audio. So like Instagram was all pictures, and this is like all audio. So you go into, you sign up, you go in, and you can be in a room and just talk to people. But people are using it for everything from like doing professional development and talking to people to actually hooking up with people. And so a big part of it is now you can have the kind of intimate phone conversations you would have with someone who without having to give up your phone number. But it's not as like. But it's kind of almost like Instagram for ugly people too. So it does a lot of things so that people can date during COVID. It's actually quite smart. A lot of people I know are absolutely recycling relationships, though. It's like, okay, you've ever heard women say like, I don't want to add. They'll call and hook up with an old guy because they don't want to add to their number. Like I've been with X number of people, and so rather than adding X plus one,
they don't want to expand. They don't want to expand the roster. They want to just go back to the bench.
Exactly. And so the benches are getting deeper. It's like the Yankees in 2004 right now. It's like people are like calling people from high school and college because they feel comfortable. And there's also this question of safety. I don't want to meet a new person because at least if you meet a new person, you can meet them out for coffee, figure out if they're insane or not, have more phone conversation. You can do all these things. But with COVID and a lot of in major cities, restaurants being shut down, you're pretty much going from the DM to your house. And people don't want strangers in their house. Partly because of the whole murder me, kill me thing, but also because of COVID. So it's like, you got to go deeper in the roster. That's what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah, there you go. See, we have like Dr. Mark for Love Lines over here. See, this is the new, we got to get into some of that in 2021. This will be something we're getting to. So I just want to say to everyone who's been joining us here for our shows, you might have figured out Mark and I actually have a lot of fun doing the show. We do a million other things in media, but this is actually one thing that's fun. So we hope you feel the same way, and you'll tell people. It's a lot of folks you're going to be seeing at your chat room meetup thing, whatever that's called. Anybody you talk to, tell them to check out What Do You Really Think. I don't think there's anything else out there that's like it, and you can subscribe on Quake Media, quakemedia.com. Mark, it has been an honor and pleasure in 2020. Looking forward to keeping it going with you in 2021, and my team is going to start winning. So just get ready for it.
I can't wait for the conversation. I can't wait to prove you wrong. Definitely can't wait for the sushi in 2021.
It's happening. Everybody, Happy New Year. We'll be back with you in January. We'll see you then.
See you then.